Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning and welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good today, too. Thanks for asking. And thank you all for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk more about the deeper insights revealed to us through the scientific prayer found in spiritual understanding. Listen as we explain how wishing, hoping, and asking violates divine law and perpetuates a belief in two powers. In this show, we will focus on how conflicting beliefs burden thought and thwart the elevation of consciousness. Human striving is not the divine way. Welcome to The Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and activate spiritual truth in your experience. Swami, the title of today's show is True Prayer Isn't Asking, It's Knowing. So what do we mean by that?
Yeah, I think a lot of us think that prayer is asking. And what we have been saying for quite some time now, that prayer should really be, instead of P-R-A-Y, it should be P-R-E-Y. Just like foxes prey on rabbits, the human and spiritual identity preys on the divine principle, the presence of this indestructible, eternal life.
And I'd like to ask you more about what has revealed to you about the scientific prayer found in spiritual understanding.
Right, and that's what we were saying. It's really not in asking anymore, but it is in knowing. The Bible tells us to know the truth, and it makes you free. It also kind of says something to ask in my name. And we have been talking about this quite a bit, that the interpretation of my name is really my likeness. That the physics of spirituality is like attracts like. And so in order for us to know this truth and be able to demonstrate spiritual principle, we have to be in spiritual identity. And that's very different than when you are a human thinking about this divine principle and asking this divine law to do something for you. And that is why a lot of it fails, because we really don't understand how it's all working. And the way that it really works is that the divine creation is perfect. It's complete. It's whole. And that is revealed in Genesis 1. Now, this secondary creation, which we find in Genesis 2, is really the human thought or concept about that perfect creation. And so if we continue to live from the level of the human and try and get this divine law down to our level to do something for us, we'll find that it's very frustrating.
I have some notes from Joel S. Goldsmith in his writings, The Heart of Mysticism, and I just want to read this short paragraph to you. And he says, "This may seem a startling statement, but you do not know how to pray. And if you are obedient to the voice of the Spirit, you never will know how to pray. The further along the spiritual path you travel, the nearer you come to the place where you let God do the praying. And it is then you let the Spirit pray in you, bear witness, make intercessions for you." That was a real big clue for me, and that is we should stop hoping and wishing and asking for things, because the Spirit, God, already knows what it is that we need. That's how I take this.
Right. But the thing that I think is very important to understand is that we're accustomed to living on a personal level, that we have a personal sense of I, a personal sense of me as an individual. And we are living out from the world of many. But in truth, there's only one principle. There's only one power in this universe. And so when you are living out from the many, what we find is that we have a belief in two powers. And we're hypnotized by this condition that we are accepting. And as a result, we're under the law of karma. That puts us in this cycle of death and rebirth. And in order for us to get out of that cycle, we have to change. And what we have to change is we have to change who we are. We have to change who we think we are. We have to know that we're not a mortal creature, that we are an eternal spiritual being. But to give up personal sense for this impersonal sense of spiritual selfhood or spiritual identity is where a lot of us, I want to say, balk at the command, because we don't want to give up that personal sense of I. And in our resistance to the way that it plays out, we stay under this law of karma. And then from that level of understanding, we're constantly seeing if we can get spiritual power or divine law to do something for us. But it doesn't work like that. Divine creation, Spirit has done its work. It's complete. It's fulfilled. It's perfect. Real prayer is just attuning ourselves with that perfect divine principle that is already in place.
Is that also what the Bible means by let go and let God?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's in the Bible. Is it? Let go and let God. I mean, that has been a saying that I remember hearing from, I think, the time of the 60s. But yeah, I think that would be the proper interpretation of that. And what is it that we have to let go is this whole personal sense of I. And in fact, Joel Goldsmith has a quote here that we talk about judging righteously or understanding or knowing ourselves. And he says here in this quote, we are admonished, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Spiritually, we understand this to mean that we are not to judge man by appearances, but consciously to know and understand the spiritual nature of his being. To recognize spirit as the law and source and activity of individual being. To look upon man as he appears to be, mortal, material, finite, sick, well, rich, poor, is to bear false witness against him. To recognize and realize Christ as the true identity of everyone and to understand love as man's true nature is to pray for him. And to me, that's a much better understanding of what it is that we're trying to do with regard to understanding how everything really works.
And we have been talking about that in other shows, and that is to look at the people that we come into contact with, not as people, but as them being the true Christ. And that is still something that I have challenges with every day. And to say that I am bearing false witness against them is a pretty powerful statement.
Right. That's a little bit of a revelation. And even, for example, that if we are asking for anything, we are admitting that we are not eternal spirit. All our pleading, begging, and bargaining to an anthropomorphic deity is just a false concept of the divine idea of what prayer really is. That we actually have to come out of this personal sense that we are accustomed to living life from the perspective of the many. And we really have to understand it from the perspective of the one. That there is one life. And like we had said last week, I really liked what Ames Knowles said. The correct idea of God is God's idea of himself. That we are God's idea. We are a reflection in this divine mind. We are a thought in this divine consciousness. And that's how you can understand the statement in the Bible where Jesus says, I and the Father are one. Because where does this unity take place but in mind? And reflection is really mind considering its own content. So as we start to unbox some of this and rise out of that personal sense level of living that we have accepted and we're kind of trapped in, once we start to rise above that and we start to see things from the perspective of unity consciousness, of one divine mind, then we have this revelation. But our recognition of this divine presence is really what will activate it in our experience. But you can't get there with this personal sense that most of us are really living out from, with our pleading and asking and trying to offer this divine, perfect creator our mortal suggestions.
Mm-hmm. I like in the writings that Joel says, he continues on to say, God knows far more about prayer and what to pray for, what you need, and how to present it than you do. Then he gives an example of what a prayer could actually look like, and he says, Father, pray, reveal thyself, the activity of thy being in me and through me. Let the Spirit make intercession for me. And I thought that was a pretty good example, at least maybe a good place to start for some of us.
Right. And again, I really like what Mary Baker Eddy says to add to that is that whole thing of it is essential that we let divine mind take over the scientific government of our body. That we really have to understand what it looks like when we forsake human thinking for this divine knowing. Because once we know the truth and we accept ourselves as spirit, we are accepting fulfillment, perfection. There's nothing that will ever need to be added or taken away or overcome because you are perfect. But you can't be a mortal creature and a perfect, eternal spiritual being at the same time.
That reminds me, we've been talking a lot about healing as well. And if I may, again, there's another prayer in here, I think that may help people for something like that. And it says, Father, I know not how to pray, nor what to pray for. I know not how to pray to become free of disease or discord. And then he says, then let the Father pray. And then you can say, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. And I think we could really make some advancement in getting rid of our discords if we do these really very simple prayers.
Oh, absolutely, because human dominion really is just God's perfect law. And all we really need to do is attune ourselves to this scientific principle that is readily available to us at any given time.
Well, this is a good place to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1, Human Development and the 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. Swami, again, in the same writings from Joel S. Goldsmith, he says, and this is I'm quoting directly from his works, to give or to pray where others may witness and possibly praise is to glorify self, and this is a violation of Christ's law. The law of self is eliminated when the gift and the prayer are secret. God is the only giver, and so praise of the self or glory drawn to the self leaves one outside the realm or benefit of the law. Giving in secret is the recognition of God as the real giver. So I thought that was very interesting, but what is your take on this praying in secret?
Yeah, I think that what they really mean by this term secret is that you're beyond appearance. Just like I had said earlier, ask in my name means that we must be in spiritual identity. Spirit is invisible, intangible. So once we are in spiritual identity, we are beyond the testimony of sense-level living. And so that's how you want to communicate, because you can't be a human and communicate with the divine. You can't have a belief in matter and mortality and have communication with the immortal and the eternal. So by the term secret, I really think what they mean is spiritual identity, that you're beyond sense level logic and living.
I think there's actually a quote too from Mary Baker Eddy about praying in secret.
Right. We have one here from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. The Master's injunction is that we pray in secret and let our lives attest our sincerity. And what she's really saying here is that you pray in secret, you live your life on a spirit level, but then the visible and the tangible aspects of your life must reflect these divine qualities and principles. Because you can't be in spiritual identity and your physical appearance or your external life is in shambles. So you use the testimony of your senses to attest to your sincerity. Am I in the truth of my being, or do I just think I'm in the truth of my being?
Yeah, interesting. I have in my notes here also, there's in Matthew 6, verses 1 through 6, he states, "When thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut the door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly." Kind of wanted to get your take on that verse.
Yeah, I think that's basically exactly what we were saying. That's what Mary Baker Eddy was saying, that if you are praying in the truth of your being, if you are in spiritual identity and you have the channels of communication open, then of course the fruits of your efforts will be revealed in your external experience. And that's one of the benefits, I think, of this concept of prayer, is that when you are in spiritual identity, you're under the protection of divine law.
So, Swami, what is it that we can expect from prayer?
Well, I like what Mary Baker Eddy says in Science and Health. Prayer cannot change the science of being, but it tends to bring us in harmony with it. And so we must rise above sense-level living into this divine truth of being. Because it's foolish to try and bring divine law down to the human sense level of consciousness. In essence, we should stop trying to patch up the false sense and ignore the truth of our being, the perfection of our being. And in science, the reverse is true. If we ignore the false sense of appearance and we know this truth of our being, that is probably the easiest way, I think, to get started with prayer.
Swami, I'm wondering can you translate that into what we've been learning about in Kriya Yoga?
Yeah, in Kriya Yoga, we address most of this, especially in the fifth stage, pratyahara, sense withdrawal, because personal sense is the barrier to spiritual understanding. So we must first free consciousness from the material moorings, and that's sense withdrawal. And then, of course, to make consciousness buoyant with divine virtue, giving up all of our human concepts, beliefs, theories, and filling our consciousness with this spiritual idea that we are perfect, harmonious, whole, peaceful, and well now.
And so you mean by material moorings, that is anything that pulls us towards what we want, what we desire?
Well, material moorings really is sense-level living. It's anything that appears in your five senses is considered material.
All right, so I have another question for you. So again, I want to go back to praying, and through what I've been researching and studying and reading, there are two persons that we can pray from, and that's our physical human sense of ourselves, and there's also ourselves in a higher consciousness. So how do we distinguish the both, and how do we know if we're praying from that right, say, person?
Well, I think, again, what we want to try and do is look at the fruits of your efforts. So you're looking at your physical body. Do you have perfect health? Because, again, you can't be in the truth of your being, in the perfection of being, and still have an abnormal condition in your physical body. So these are some of the things that we want to be able to examine and look at. Do I understand how to pray correctly? And I like what Mary Baker Eddy says in Science and Health. If we pray to God as a corporeal person, this will prevent us from relinquishing the human doubts and fears which attend such a belief. So we cannot grasp the wonders wrought by infinite, incorporeal love, to whom all things are possible. Because of human ignorance of the divine principle, love, the Father of all is represented as a corporeal creator. Hence, men recognize themselves as merely physical and are ignorant of man as God's image or reflection of man's eternal, incorporeal existence. The world of error is ignorant of the world of truth, blind to the reality of man's existence, for the world of sensation is not cognizant of the life in soul, not in body. So again, do we sow to the flesh or do we sow to the spirit? But the final result is going to be if you are in attunement with this divine principle, then you should be able to demonstrate divine law with scientific certainty.
I know that she talks a lot about being absent from the body and being present with the Lord. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, again, in Science and Health, she says, if we are sensibly with the body and regard omnipotence as corporeal, material person, whose ear we would gain, we are not absent from the body and present with the Lord in the demonstration of spirit. We cannot serve two masters. To be present with the Lord is to have not mere emotional ecstasy or faith, but the actual demonstration and understanding of life as revealed in Christian Science. To be with the Lord is to be in obedience to the law of God and to be absolutely governed by divine love, by spirit, not by matter. And so again, if we continue to react to the testimony of our senses, then we are really in violation of this presence of this divine law. She also says, she goes on and she says, become conscious for a single moment that life and intelligence is purely spiritual, neither in nor of matter, and the body will then utter no complaints. If suffering from a belief in sickness, you will find yourself suddenly well. Sorrow is turned into joy when the body is controlled by spiritual life, truth, and love. Hence the hope of the promise Jesus bestows, he that believeth on me, the works that I do, he do also, because I go unto my Father. Because the ego is absent from the body and present with truth and love. The Lord's Prayer is the prayer of soul, not of material sense. So she really lays it out for us. The next level, of course, is to take this information from an academic level of knowing to the next level of doing until eventually we become spiritual.
I think that was really important when she says, Jesus bestows, he that believeth on me, the work that I do shall he do also. Because I think we are brought up thinking that Jesus is the one that performed all these miracles and what a sight that must have been to behold, but we don't put ourselves in the same category as Jesus.
Right, because we have to understand that Jesus didn't do the miracles. It was the Christ that is doing the work. And the same is true for us, that once we step out of personal sense and we assume our true divine inheritance as a child of the divine, then of course we can start to speak with authority like it says in the Bible. But if we are a human talking out from a mortal sense of existence, then of course we lack the principle of the divine behind what it is we're saying. Anything that we do really relies on belief.
So I have another quote here from Mary Baker Eddy, and just wanted to maybe have you break this down for us. And that quote is, without a fitness for holiness, we cannot receive holiness.
Yes, see, to me, that's where I think Christian Science dovetails completely with the Kriya Yoga, the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga that we have been teaching, because it really implies what we call the physics of spirituality. You can't be a mortal creature and communicate with the immortal spiritual presence. So the whole element of purification, we have to purify ourselves, purge ourselves, make our consciousness a hospitable environment to receive the presence of spirit, which is something that I think yoga really focuses on.
I think this is a good place. We have to start breaking down our show for today. So listeners, be sure to visit the website, www.ipdtransform.com. And once you're there, 3/4 of the way down the homepage, you'll see that section entitled Swami Says Recent Posts, and you'll see this show as well as others listed there you can click on to further your spiritual developments. Don't forget, Swami also has a free webinar Wednesdays at noon. And don't forget, we have a Theory 2 class Thursday nights at 7. You can also access that from the online classes tab as well. So, Swami, have any other final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage everybody to accept the perfection of their being and to start to live out from that truth and demonstrate the principle of divine law. And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton with Swami Jayananda. We'll be signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.